Ibi Zoboi to Marvel's Black Panther universe. So Nic Stone's book most recent book is the third one in her Shuri series. It's called Symbiosis, Shuri, a Black Panther novel. And Zoboi's book is OKOYE to the People, which just came out today. We are so excited to have her here. And we do still have a limited number of signed copies available in store and online. So go ahead and order those if you are interested, which I'm sure you will be after hearing how amazing both of these books are. I'm just going to do brief bios of both authors, and then I'll let them get into the conversation. So Nic Stone is the New York Times bestselling author of the novels Dear Martin and Odd One Out. She was born and raised in a suburb of Atlanta, Georgia, and the only thing she loves more than adventure is a good story about one. After graduating from Spelman College, she worked extensively in teen mentoring and lived in Israel for a few years before returning to the U.S. to write full-time. Growing up with a wide range of cultures, religions, and backgrounds, she strives to bring those diverse voices and stories to her work. It's just me alone, but yay! All right, and Ibi Zoboi was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and holds an MFA in writing for children and young adults from Vermont College of Fine Arts. Her YA novel American Street was a National Book Award finalist, and her debut middle grade novel My Life as an Ice Cream Sandwich was a New York Times bestseller. She is also the author of Pride, a contemporary YA remix of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, the co-author of the Walter Award-winning Punching the Air with prison reform activist Dr. Yusuf Salaam of the Exonerated Five, and the editor of Black Enough, Stories for Being Young and Black in America. Her debut picture book, The People Remember, received a Coretta Scott King Book Honor Award. OKOYE to the People is Zoboi's second book to come out this year. She had another YA book, Star Child, a biographical constellation of Octavia Estelle Butler, come out in January, and we were so lucky to welcome her back for a virtual YA book festival, Novatine, last week. And that talk is recorded and on our YouTube channel if you would like to check that out after. Raised in New York City, Zoboi now lives in New Jersey with her husband and their three children. We are so excited to welcome Ibi Zoboi and Nic Stone, and I'm going to get out of their way so they can talk.
Thank you, Sam.
Yes, Sam, thank you so much. Yo, I've been so excited to talk to you about this book since.
Hey, Stone.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute.
Yes.
Yes.
I wrote a Marvel, Nic Stone. I wrote a Marvel.
You did, and I'm so excited to be talking about it. Like, so not only did you, so I don't even know. Wait, okay. So my first question is, what was your introduction to OKOYE?
My introduction to OKOYE, the character, is with probably most of the country through the Marvel Cinematic Universe, through MCU, the movie. I may be lying. I knew about them before that. I knew about the Dora Milaje through the comic books, but I had not read the comic books. My husband is a comic book fan, and he has the first Marvel Black Panther. He knows the history, so I leaned on him heavily writing this. But ultimately, it was Captain America when one of the Dora Milaje shows up and it was like, move or you will be moved. I was like,
yes,
I have my hair is usually cut low, and I love like seeing bald Black women, and I was like, is that it me?
Yes.
That was the first time, and it was on people, lots of chatter about the Dora Milaje. And I'll, ask me why I decided to write this book. Because it's not.
That was going to be my next question, actually.
That was my first real intro on the screen, but I hadn't paid much attention to their presence in the comic books. I'm not really a comic book fan. I am a sci-fi fan, but not necessarily comic books.
Yeah. I mean, I love what you did too. And like, we're going to really get into that.
Right.
I do want to know why you chose, not only why you chose to write about Okoye, but why you chose to tell the story you told. Because this is not your typical like superhero flip kick fight story. And I think that you added a lot of richness to the character as a result of making it not necessarily that.
Right. And I want to know why you came to Shuri too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, if I was ever presented between Shuri and Okoye, I would have picked Okoye. But I wasn't presented that opportunity, but Okoye came to me. You know, Marvel was knocking on everybody's door, you know, that for transparency's sake. I think, you know, and this was, I sold this book in 2018, and our debut was the year before, 2017. And then Black Panther came out 2017 or
2018.
2018. So it was new. It was still
Yeah.
fresh. And it was when the opportunity came, I was like, you know, that meme, that GIF where he's like, it was exciting because the movie, as you know, was really huge. And of course I wanted to do it, but then that without really thinking about it, I said yes, but then I had to pause for a little bit and negotiate some terms and think about, wait a minute, I don't want to keep doing, I had so many projects coming down the pipeline, and this was a situation where it had to be done in like a month, and I was like, hit it and quit it, you know. But I decided somewhere along the line, a month became a year became 2, and then the pandemic happened. And 3 years later, here we are. So basically, I decided to do some research on it, and I kind of knew that the Dora Milaje were based on the Amazon Dahomey warriors. And I'm Haitian, and the Haitians are connected to the Dahomey people in Benin and the Fon people in West Africa. So I always knew about those warriors. And I was like, okay, I can flip it. If I can do this, I can flip it on its head and connect it to the actual Dahomey warriors. And I'm thinking about, I love African mythology. I'm also thinking about Oya, and there's like an Egyptian goddess, Sekhmet. There are all these Egyptian warriors that we have in our pantheon. So I'm bringing all the nerdiness to saying yes to this project that probably didn't end up in the book, but this is why I decided to work on it. It took longer than it needed to be. I wish, you know, it was kind of like a hit it and quit it, because this was 2018. A lot of things had not happened yet. Chadwick, we still had Chadwick Boseman, you know, we still had the dream. We were still all looking forward to Black Panther 2, and with the hopes of him being, you know, continuing on in that storyline. So, but now that it's come out, it's just like the world feels so heavy, and I kind of want a real superhero, but it's okay. Okoye is cool too.
Yeah, I mean, you have her doing some amazing things. I came to Shuri similarly, and same with you. Like there was something about, like you were talking about seeing Io in in Captain America. I think it was Captain America: Civil War.
Yeah,
And her bald head, and you were like, yes, that was me with Shuri, because Shuri was this like nerdy science girl who was a teenager. You know, like I was that teenager who was super into math and science, and who wasn't super liked because of it. You know, when I was in 7th grade, my favorite book was Michael Crichton's Sphere, like hardcore adult science fiction, Jurassic Park, The Lost. Like I just ate Michael Crichton books like candy. And so to encounter this character, and encountering her on screen, she's younger than she is in the comics. So seeing her, it was a completely different iteration than who we see in the comic books, because she's younger. And so then I was asked to do it, I think in like early 2019, and they asked me specifically to do Shuri, and I jumped on it because like finally I was going to get to write the nerd girl of my dreams, who just happened to be helping to keep her country safe, you know. But I do think there's something to be said about having the opportunity to kind of validate yourself in working on these characters. And I want to know what that was like for you, because not only did you write Okoye, you write Okoye coming to the US as her first mission, and she winds up in Brownsville and is shook by some of the stuff that she sees. And I know, so there's it's got like a bit of an immigrant bit to it. Like there's so much in there that I hope felt like validation for you when you were writing it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was. I didn't think I could do that. And I was intimidated by the idea of writing her in Wakanda. And you did it very well in your Shuri books. Because it's an imagined world. And I gotta say, I wonder if it was hard for you. One of the hardest things for me, the second hardest things for me was to constantly be reminded that Wakanda is based on science and not magic. Because we're so used to seeing African like stories. If there's any sort of otherworldliness, it's magical and not technological or scientific. So in the writing process, I know this in the back of my mind, but while writing, I'm like the Kimoyo beads don't just appear, right? The vibranium spear, it's not like, it's not juju, it's magic, there's science behind it. And I'm like, oh, what is science? So I love science fiction, but not the sort, like not the commercial stuff. I love sociology, social commentary in science fiction, the Octavia Butler stuff.
Yes.
And big like space dramas that say something about the state of our world. So the scientific, like, I'm a child of the 80s, so I'm gonna throw MacGyver in there. Like how stuff works. I'm like, what? So that was the hardest thing to write. So that was part of the idea of taking her out of Wakanda and putting her in Brownsville, Brooklyn. I'm like, okay, there are no gadgets here. She could be a fish out of water, which is my experience, my immigrant experience. I came to US when I was 4, but my entire upbringing is sort of like always fish out of water. Like even as a published author, I still feel like a fish out of water, because I have those cultural dichotomies. So absolutely, where you place yourself in Shuri's shoes, I place myself in Okoye, but not Okoye within Wakanda, Okoye outside of Wakanda.
Which is awesome. Like, so the science part is my favorite part. I love getting to, literally I got to make up science and it sounded like it made sense, but it was total bullcrap. Like the idea of vibranium, I think, is fascinating. The idea of a metal that absorbs sound. I had a field day with this stuff.
Right.
But what you did with Okoye, really, it kind of parallels T'Challa's story in the comics. And so I was really fascinated by that, right? So T'Challa, he's introduced in Fantastic Four in like 1966. And he winds up leaving Wakanda to become an Avenger, right? And so he's in America. He's a fish out of water. And he winds up having to grapple with wanting to go home, but also wanting to help fix some of the broken things that he sees. And Okoye has this similar experience. And I wonder, my question is like, why did you decide to go that route instead of having her just like kicking ass and taking names?
So I write books with heart, right? Mm-hmm. When I write what I want to write, they're with heart, and they're character-driven stories. I like pretty sentences. So I could not. Number one difficult thing to do was to write action scenes, fighting scenes. And I could think my way through a story, my character. So, in revisions now, just like, let's get out of her head a little bit and make her do stuff. So she's a warrior. She does stuff. And I had to get editorial notes to say, like, she has to fight something now. And I'm like, how does she swing her arm? So in that sense, I leaned on what I feel I'm more familiar territory, with just her having an emotional back and forth, and an internal process, and kids saying something about their world. Um, Gentrification is what it's all about. And because I'm still in my feelings about not being able to afford Brooklyn anymore, so it's always going to come up.
Mhm.
Uh, and Brownsville is a particular neighborhood. I lived in Brownsville. I know I don't present that way, but I'm from the hood, but I'm not, I wasn't in the streets. I was watching from a window because I was in the house all the time.
I love that so much.
I was hood adjacent. So I would watch stuff go down, and I was kind of like protected by my cousins who was always on the street. So all the things I observed growing up in New York City, I put into the book. Um, so it's observation. It is contending with the fact that there is a badass African country, right? Albeit fictional. What do you do with the state of Black people all over the world, right? There has to be Wakandans who come out and be like, WTF? Uh, what
Yes.
would Wakanda do about police brutality? What would Wakanda do about Black Lives Matter, or juvenile justice, things we've written about?
Hmm.
So that was an opportunity to take a Wakanda warrior and put her face to face with some badass street kids who are trying to make a difference. So yeah, that was like, I mean, I wonder what Shuri would do if she was starting school here, and would they call her like, would they not like her because she was a nerd or something like that? Or, I'd love to see Shuri in like Atlanta in Buckhead or something.
Look, that would be a mess. She would be like
Not the hood.
inventing gadgets to like, Buckhead is super not the hood, but
West
yeah.
West
The
End.
West End is gentrifying.
There's another hood that starts with the letter B. What is it?
Bankhead.
Bankhead, yeah, for sure. For sure, in the school in Bankhead.
She would have some fun in Bankhead. But see, that's the cool thing, right? So I got to write Shuri at age 13. You're writing Okoye as a teenager, right? So we're
Yeah.
we're adding to the canon, and so that was one of my favorite things. Yeah, like one of my favorite things about getting to tell these stories is we got to add to the canon, and this is something that I think people don't necessarily think about when it comes to superhero stories, whether they are comics, books, or films. Every time a character passes through the hands of a creator, that creator is adding to the character and kind of expanding on the character. What do you feel like you added to Okoye's character to round her out a bit? Because obviously this is the most rounded I've ever seen her written, because this is the most extensively I've ever seen her written.
There, Kamara, I forgot her last name, but she is Blurred Girl online.
Mm-hmm.
So she is writing an extensive Dora Milaje training manual. I'm forgetting the name. It comes out in September. I just had a talk with her, and it was such a good conversation about her and me and you and Nedia Corfor and Roxane Gay doing all this work to build on the canon of the Dora Milaje. And there will be more. There should be more, of course. And how that is so great. And that is also a little exploitative because just a little, right? In terms of just, this is based on real people. She, and I'm not going to repeat her verbatim, but it's this idea of that we are adding to the canon of characters that were created by two white men, right? Based on real warriors who were probably fighting colonization. So it's like a conundrum here, right? Which is why I had a hard time really like, yay, but buy this book. I love what I did here, but at the same time, it feels confining in a way where we love Okoye. At the same time, there are other authors who wrote warrior women into their fantasy novels. So we are adding to the canon. However, how will we benefit from it? You know,
Yeah.
how beneficial for us. It is entertaining. It's good for kids to see themselves in that way. However, I don't want the Dora Milaje to be the only type of bald-headed warrior women that we see.
Bars.
Been so commodified that if there are other bald-headed black women in something else, people will be like, "We seen that already."
Dora Milaje, basically. Yeah. I mean, look, it is interesting, right? Because like we both are writing characters that were created. Actually, our characters were created by Black people. Christopher Priest created the Dora Milaje.
Okay.
But they were very different than what we're doing. Like they were created as basically potential
Yes, she
wives.
said that. She said
Yes.
that, and they didn't look like that. Like
They were very sexy. Okay. They were, yes, yes. And then Reginald Hudlin created Shuri and also fleshed out the Dora Milaje in a different way. So, but even that is like Black people are adding to this thing that was created by white men, like you said.
mhm.
It is fascinating, though, seeing the difference in what comes out when these characters are written by us versus written by white people. And to that end, I want to know what you felt like you were able to bring to Okoye that nobody else would have been able to. Because there are things that only you could have brought to her. So don't be humble.
That's true. I think that's true. And I'm not gonna be humble. I
Good.
think there is. I call myself Afrocentric, African centered. Like there was a movement like 25 years ago, and I never wavered in that. I love, look at me with my little carry. You can see my home. So I understand this idea of like a professor of mine used to say, we are African not because we are born in Africa, but because Africa is born in us. In that there are cultures that never parts of cultural retention we never like discarded. It's still there. Like how it shows up, the swag, all of that, the lingo, how we put ourselves together is all like African cultural retentions. And I could understand that in a very intellectual way, which is why I can take like an African warrior whose nation was never colonized, right? And who represents like African ingenuity in its purest form. What if Africa was never colonized? What if Africa was able to keep its natural resources and be able to profit from them to serve its own people? And here you have Wakanda coming face to face with descendants of colonized people or stolen people who gain their freedom, who are given places to live in this like very wealthy city, but are pushed back to the borders and they still have to fight their home. And they are experiencing colonization through the form of gentrification. And you bring that face to face. What would Okoye say? Like, if I help them, we put ourselves at risk, right? We can't help everybody. Like we are so far removed. I'm talking about the kids in Brownsville, right? And that hood in America are so far removed from what Wakanda is. Maybe sometimes they can't have a basic understanding of each other, which is what the epigraph in the book is all about. Like we know each other so well that we don't know each other. We don't even recognize each other. So yeah, I come with like the intellectual sensibility. It's not that I can't just make her like kicking butt and taking names sort of thing. There had to be a sort of saying, like, just things that they say that we found a home and we don't even have a place to call our own because we're constantly being pushed around, whether through, stealing deeds or, increasing rent. And there's a sinister thing there. It's based on me growing up during the crack epidemic in New York City, like being a kid during the war on drugs. I don't know. Did you have DARE?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I was in DARE choir. Okay.
There's a DARE choir.
We had a DARE choir.
What were you singing about? Crack?
We were singing about please don't smoke. Like that was seriously a song.
That sounds like an SNL skit. Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding at all. I'm not kidding at all. Please don't smoke. It is no joke. Like it was,
Okay. There'll probably be
girl.
like a Dare Step team or something. I think there was a Dare Step team somewhere. So that kind of makes sense. But overall, I said it in like an, although this may have been the early 2000s or because she's a teen, but some of those things were still around in New York City. But basically taking those 80s ideas and modernizing them and putting some science fiction bent to them. Bushwick was kind of burnt out and dilapidated when I was growing up there. So this idea of landlords used to burn their own buildings down, get people to just like set them on fire because residents weren't paying rent and they needed to collect money. And the easiest way to collect money on their property was to like, oops, a fire and collect insurance money and abandon those places. This was happening all around Bronx. The Bronx is burning, Harlem, and some neighborhoods in Brooklyn, New York, mainly Bushwick and parts of Brownsville. I'm going to go off on tangent because I have a lot to
No, please. This is great.
Wait, what was that? What was your original question?
I don't remember. I'm into it. Whatever you say, no. Because look, you're saying some very powerful stuff, and this is actually one of my favorite things about your work. You're able to make things timeless, right? So like you're talking about stuff that happened in like the 80s and 90s, but you bring it forward and you do the same thing. So like Pride, right? You take Pride, this old school Jane Austen story, and you modernize it, but it's still the meat is still there, right? So with this story, there is this taking things that you experienced growing up and bringing them into the 21st century where they are actually still happening. I appreciated that. That's more of a comment than a question, but yes.
Thank you. And then sometimes those things don't land universally. And I didn't realize that until I really started traveling for school visits. Like I really did not travel around the country before I became an author. You know, maybe I went to 4 or 5 places, but going to places like Arkansas, you know, and seeing the middle of America in Illinois, that is not Chicago, and going to Missouri, St. Louis, what around there.
I mean, Missouri, you're not wrong. How frequently our books get banned in that state.
Texas, shout out to Texas.
Hey.
And seeing that when you're writing about urban landscapes and making commentary, they don't usually land in places where it doesn't look like New York City. Growing up in New York City during a certain time, even if it was 5 years earlier, was very different and very culturally specific. And writing that down sometimes, like I know it's not going to be like all over like not everybody's going to get it, you know? But hopefully I love it I like putting it in a science fiction context because it sounds so outrageous. People be like, oh, that's crazy, you know, but it's based on some real stuff that happened in New York City.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk a little more science fiction. Because when do we get more science fiction from you?
Oh, me? Oh, science fiction is not having a moment right now. Nic Stone.
Bring it, make it a moment, trend set. Okay, I feel like you could do that.
Science fiction is not having a moment. And I'm interested in like your brand of science fiction because I've been able to talk about science fiction and there's stuff in Okoye to the People. There's a drug called, I'm not going to say what it's called, but it comes from Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. So I don't want to give it away, but my brand of science fiction doesn't necessarily came from books. It came from being in like an underground subculture in New York City. You know what? The one thing I could probably compare, like me being in like my late teens and early college, early 20s, was the Jazz Cafe in Atlanta. Was it called the Jazz Cafe or the something cafe where like the hippies, Afro Bohemian, dirty backpackers frequent in the late 90s? And I had friends who would go there and I wanted to go there. Where Erykah Badu would perform. Some early early neo soul people would go there. So we were like, you know, dreads, carry shells, shea butter, and incense kids who were into Afrofuturism. So my foundation is Afrofuturism within the spoken word movement, within fashion and music, versus reading books by white authors. So when I say that, people think like I was like into Michael Crichton or whatever,
Yeah.
or reading Philip K. Dick in the classics. I was not reading that. We were reading Gloria Naylor, that brand of like speculative fiction. And of course, within that underground movement was Octavia Butler. But it was like poets like Saul Williams, and other poets like them who were talking about universe. People were high and talking,
Yes.
traveling to other dimensions. And I was in college, like when The Matrix came out, and we were really excited about The Matrix and the red pill and the blue pill, and comparing our existence to being in the Matrix, right? Like publishing Matrix, right? So that's how I tell my friends. But that's my foundation. That's like kids who understood that they were like back in the 90s when buildings were, during the drug war, it was a conspiracy theory. We were conspiracy theorizing everything. So that science fiction world was rooted in Afrofuturism, where we saw ourselves in the future, where the kids were reading comic books, were reading Black Panther, knew who all the Black characters that came out in both Marvel and DC. So that nerdhood is what my foundation is, and not within the white literary canon.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So in that sense, to write science fiction now, it's more speculative fiction rooted in Afrofuturism. So I do have my next books are all speculative fiction now, because now I get to write. Now I'm in there, and I'm like, I'm not going to slip it in anymore. But that's what I wanted to say about science fiction. If we open up the doors, because I would love to write dystopia, because that's what I was trying to first publish. And how the narrative is, when there's like a trend, the trend is over, and a whole bunch of us, we're just like, wait a minute.
Hello. Oh, but sorry, the market is oversaturated.
Wait. So, is there a genre that you wanted to dip your toe in, but then the answer was market is saturated? Or
literally exactly what you just said. There's like speculative dystopia type stuff. The first book I ever wrote is actually I put it on Wattpad because nobody would publish it back when I wrote it. But it was definitely, so my experience was more or less the opposite of yours. The things I didn't encounter, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, Octavia Butler, like I didn't encounter any of those beautiful bastions of Black literature, of literature in general, until I went to Spelman. So I grew up in the suburbs of Atlanta, and it's not like there weren't Black people around. It's just that we were Black people who were put in an environment where assimilation was your only option, really. If you wanted to succeed in this particular school district, you had to read these books, you had to be able to discuss these topics, et cetera. And so, yeah, Michael Crichton was my introduction to science fiction. And I did really love what I read in his work, though, I will say. And I think that there was something about the expansiveness of imagination that I saw in those books that I didn't really get to see aimed at people who looked like me. Like, right. We just didn't get to exist in those spaces. So that's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to write these stories where like some Black kid finds a pterodactyl egg and then all hell breaks loose because he figures out how to hatch it. Like there are so many stories we haven't gotten to tell about us because the market is oversaturated.
And I want to say, like, correct that a little bit to say that we were writing it, right?
Yes, I just didn't have access. Right.
We didn't have the means of production, right?
Yes.
Because when I was writing I wasn't the only I wasn't a special snowflake writing what I was writing.
Yeah.
There where all my friends were all writing the same thing, but the difference is not everybody was trying to get published. Like we were on some old like, no, we're not gonna let the man take off. It was we were all like, let's just create space, you know. And it may not have been novels, it was a chapbook, a speculative fiction poetry. Some of us would make more money traveling to perform than whatever publishers were giving us. This is 25 years ago. So I'm coming from the foundation where people turned away from traditional publishing because they weren't letting us in the first place. So nobody knocking on those doors. Being like a New York Times bestseller was never, ever a goal, because like people who, like when I was really writing, it was like Terry McMillan on the bestseller list. And Elin Harris, like real commercial sort of BET books, right?
Yes. Yes.
And for YA, like nobody was really it was really commercial books, so it wasn't even an option, right? Things have changed for the better, but I'm coming from a space where in wanting to write speculative fiction, like I knew that it would have to be a niche market and was ready to accept pennies, right?
Yeah.
Said, here's $5. And I did publish a very good story for $10. And it was out there. I'm like, cool, it's out there. People could read it.
Did it. Yes. But I think that background though, it has been beneficial in a sense, because most of your stories kind of exist outside of the confines of what we're told we're allowed to write. Especially this one. Like when I think about what you did with Okoye and this idea of this person we meet in a superhero universe having to deal with some on the ground stuff. Like she is facing and having to grapple with some on the ground stuff. Like you can pull that off. There are a lot of people who couldn't pull that off. But I think that part of the reason you can pull that off is because of this background that you have, where you kind of created your own road, really.
Yeah, I think that came with a few sacrifices, just going through, and not to say like my books fit a narrative. Like I had to write a Pride and Prejudice retelling, right?
Yeah.
I was sort of paying my dues. If you told me 10 years ago, I'd be like, I sold my soul to the devil or something, like, but meaning like I would have never done that before. But there is, and I was telling last night as a bookstore event, that the reality is we don't talk about the need to support ourselves while we're writing.
Yeah.
How we've been lucky enough to play in the Marvel universe. At the same time, we couldn't do it for free, right?
Right.
It is one of those things where I learned a lot in terms of craft. I learned how to write quickly, write action scenes very quickly. But at some point in my career, like 3-4 years ago, an opportunity came, and it came with like money. I wasn't in a place to say no to certain things. So it's an opportunity. We are building on the canon. However, it serves another purpose where we need to work, right? And this is still financial work. And I wanted to make that clear for, a big corporate entity like Disney and Marvel to say, like, we're not just doing this for fun, it's fun.
But also,
right. But also, like, it's not exposure, right? It's not exposure. Was it exposure for you?
No, not really. No, not the books. I mean, like, they're definitely, hosting a Marvel podcast was definitely exposure, but like writing.
I want you to talk about that.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about it. But like writing the books, not really. I guess it was exposure in the Marvel space, which then led to these other things. But I did enjoy writing them. And that so what I will say is that in addition to what you just said about like, yes, absolutely, we are not going to walk past these opportunities at the time that they were presented to us. It wasn't an option to say no or to walk past them. I did appreciate having the space to, like I said earlier, validate my own existence as a kid and to put it out into the world that like, hey, there are really smart science-loving Black girls doing really dope stuff out in the world.
Right.
Here's a book about one / a whole bunch of them. And this is a character that a lot of people know and love. So there was some, that was what was in it for me, because it wasn't a ton of money, to be honest. But yeah, that was what was in it for me, was just this self-validation and this kind of like legitimization of a person that I was told didn't exist, but that I was, you know? Yeah.
So if this opportunity came to me like now, right, or even last year, I would say no, right? One, I'm financially, I'm in a place where I could be like, nah, I'm good, right? And in another sense, there are fantasy books that are the ideas of Black women, right? There are way more fantasy books now based on African mythology than there were in 2018.
Yes.
And my idea would be like, okay, this is one Wakandan warrior, and there are others, right? There like a handful. That's not a lot. It seems like a lot comparatively, right? Even compared to 2018. So it would just be like, okay, somebody who's in that canon already can take this on, right? Or someone newer who wants to like get their foot in the game can do that. But mostly for me, it would be, there's a spate of Black women writing Black girls in magical settings. They're kicking butt, taking names. They can exist out there too. Okoye does need her own story at the same time. She does, truly. Right. Does need her own story. At the same time, I would defer to somebody new, newer. Well, I was new back in 2018 too. So it is a testament to where we are in our careers. Yeah. I did an interview, and Sarah Ennis, I liked the title that she did to the interview, where I said it and she took that quote and made it the title, that your personal journey, your publishing journey is not your personal journey. Right. Yeah. So it's like people kind of like think they know you based on the books you write, but the books that you write for me, they tell like a story about needing to support myself while I write the books of my heart, versus someone who, for whatever lifestyle they have, the books that they write are able to tell the story of their heart projects. Because of the different places that you are in your life, right?
Yeah. Well, we're at a good point for audience questions, if there are any. Maybe.
Oh, they got all these people in the chat. Okay.
Hi, sorry. Took me a second to hit the correct buttons. So our question is from Tivia Linnell, and she asks, for both of you, have these two stories left some lingering urge to create your own original stories with warrior women or superhuman/hero women? And I'll put that on the screen so you can look at it.
Thank you. Yeah. My next book, when we came on the screen, I laughed because Nic put a fist up, and the fist emoji, right? I seen the cover sketch of my next book, and the little fist emoji is on there, and I'm rethinking about that fist emoji because it's so cliche. But then I'm just like, it needs to be on the cover. And then just seeing you do that, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put it on the cover. Yeah. But yeah, I am writing more. I do want to write more badass girls. How about you, Nic?
I find that I need a break from kid lit. I think eventual girl,
Blasphemy.
your girl is taking a breather.
Bye.
I'm taking a whole breather for a minute because, but I do think, but it also has to do with just like the scale of production I've been operating under for the past few years. Like, I'm tired, frankly, and trying to navigate the children's literature space during a pandemic. There was a point where I was going to therapy twice a week because I was like, I don't know what's happening. Like, this is too much. Like, I just need too much. So I do definitely eventually want to do more creating of original characters and stories about not only warrior women and superhumans, but just Black kids in general with superpowers, because there just aren't enough of those. But it's going to be a minute because right now I'm writing like upmarket thrillers that about like strippers. Like, I'm just going in a completely different direction and having a blast. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
So sorry to hear that. At the same time, congratulations
Thanks.
for just just opening up and venturing out.
Yeah.
And like self-care and knowing when it is exhausting. But I had a moment to think about what it is. It's not the whole thing. It is social media, to me, makes it even more exhausting. Like, it is, for me, it's 90% of the work that tires me out. So I can scale back on one thing and focus on the other. I love kid lit, but I don't always love like the authoring part of it. So someone had asked, like, there's a difference between a writer and being an author. I want to be an artist. These artists who just like hide out and then they're like, here's my heart. And then they go back. So that I realized I can do that. And I just want to surround myself with people who support that. Good on you for knowing when it's time to like step back or step back in,
I mean, granted, I have 6 more kidlit books that will come out before I actually take a breath.
Good.
But and including another Marvel one.
Good.
And that isn't announced, so I can't say any more about it. But like, it's like, I think it's just what I have learned from operating in such a massive storytelling universe is that it's okay for me to find my corner and to like sit in it and do my thing, I will say I do love working with Marvel, and I love getting to do stuff with Marvel. Like, they've asked me if I want to make new characters. Like, yeah. So it's like having that kind of space that I can create in is really, really awesome. But I just need a break from the politics side of children's literature.
Yeah, it doesn't come with the territory. That's what I realized. So it's okay to like snip and just so superstardom doesn't have to come with it. That was never a goal. So you can be an artist. This is a space where you can decide to be an artist and not do all the extra stuff. I was supposed to do more Marvel book stuff, and it was okay for me to say I can't do this. And to have everybody be okay with it and remember that we are people. We are human. Not
Right. There's no like putting oil in the shoulder and then no, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And who Tivia is, I'm sorry, thank you so much. I think she was in our Amen Corner over here. Hi.
Yes.
I don't know who else is on here. People are tired. Thank you for hosting this. But I do acknowledge that I had a great turnout at Anderson's in person. And I think people are ready to like be around warm bodies again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is screen fatigue, and whoever's on here, thank you, Nick, and thank you, Sam, for being here. But this is also like we're ready to just like. I wish I can touch you, Nick.
Yeah, I need a hug.
Yeah, you are taller than me. I'll hug your waist.
Eventually, I'm not that much taller. You know, you carry very tall. How tall are you?
No, I'm wide.
You are whatever.
I'm wide.
We've
I
got
have
some
a small
love.
child behind me. TSA always thinks I have a small child behind me, but never.
Look, you. I wouldn't mind. I'm just saying.
Hey, Leah.
Hi, Leah. We were talking about you and your boarding school experience.
Okay.
All right. I have one question for both of you. Before, we're coming up on time and y'all are very tired. You've been writing nonstop, and that is not easy. And promoting books is also not easy, and being on Zoom all day is also not easy. So, last question. If both of you could write another beloved famous character from any work of literature, any film, any media that you've consumed, who would that be?
Oh man. Oh wow. Oh wow.
That's such a broad question. Like, give us like a universe to choose from. Like, there's so many characters.
Thank you. I would I'll see. You know what? I am such a fan. This is Octavia Butler. I have her by my book. She created a character by the name of Lauren Oya Olamina in the Parable series. And Lauren gathers people to like usher them into like safe spaces. No, that's not the person I'd write about. Never mind.
Well, and Ibi, you kind of already did touch on, another established universe with the Pride and Prejudice retelling.
Yeah.
I would not touch that again. That was fun. I can't wait for Bridgerton. I can't. I love it. If there is a retelling, I do want, and it's in the back of my mind, I would love to do Lord of the Flies.
Oh, I would love for you to do Lord of the Flies.
I probably would. You would probably do Lord of the Flies.
Oh, I hated Lord of the Flies with burning, seething passion.
I did not like it either, but I am just thinking of some teens,
Yeah.
from different walks of life, just stranded on an island and just go at it. Build a or just go at it and make a commentary about where we are now. Just books with social commentary. I can't think of any quintessential character from a classic novel.
See, you just said classic, and I'm like, oh, I know who I would write about. I would do a Hester Prynne story, but she got to be Black. Like, I got to do like Black Hester Prynne from The Scarlet Letter. Like, I feel like,
my God.
I feel like I would have a good time with Hester, and her life would look a little different if I'm writing her. But it's something that's something I could see myself doing. I could see myself writing Hester Prynne.
I talk about having to read The Scarlet Letter in high school and how I didn't connect with it at all. So I didn't
not in the least.
I didn't know who you're talking about. But if we're gonna do classic, I would do Tituba, the Witch of Salem, just a remake of from the Salem witch trials.
See, there's so much stuff.
So much. But then
there's so much.
I think we're at a point where we can make up our own too,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Mike said he hated that book.
I also had to read The Red Badge of Courage. You remember that, no?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Canterbury.
You see my face?
Yeah.
Mark Twain, and this will be like the last thing I say, but like Mark Twain's, I would love to see Mark Twain writing the kind of stories that he wrote because they were all satire, right? Like having to read Mark Twain in the 21st century was trash. But I do think that if I had read it back when it was written and when it was very satirical and when it was like making jabs at the establishment left and right, I wonder if I would have felt a little differently about it. I've also studied him a little bit, and he is a fascinating white man. Like Mark Twain, I really think Mark Twain knew how to party. Like I just have this hunch. And I've been asked before, like if you could have dinner with any author who's different from you from any time in history, it would be Mark Twain for me. Who would it be for you? Definitely. It can't be a Black woman. It can't be a Black woman. It's got to be.
Sorry, I'm gonna eat alone. No, because every time you think of a white male author, there's something problematic about them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It probably wouldn't be an author. I am fascinated by Steven Goldberg, Steven Spielberg,
mm-hmm.
George Lucas, and his Black wife. I'd have dinner. Invite me over. But no, I think I would want to sit down with Zora Neale Hurston. But I didn't read. I'm fascinated by you actually reading these classics. I did not read anything in high school, and I skated by. So that's fascinating. I could not, did not. I was in English honors, and I don't remember reading one of those books from cover to cover at all.
Yeah. I don't know that I think I probably, and I didn't read all of them. I definitely did not finish Lord of the Flies. So I was like, nope. That was one of the ones I was like, nope, this is not, we're not doing this. But there actually were a few that I did read, but I think that I was reading them more from a space of like, what the hell is this? Like, it was just like, and wanting to know why this book was assigned. Like, of all of the books we could be reading, why the hell are we reading this one? Like, it's like I was like looking for the diamond that I never found.
Ursula Le Guin. I'd have that.
Yeah. Okay.
That's about it. Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much. I think it's always a good time, Nic. Thank you so much.
And thanks to both of you.
This wasn't even a level 10 Nic. We got muted, Nic. This is a little under the weather.
Look, Nic, this is gastritis, Nic.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Well, in spite of that, thank you both so much for joining us and for sharing your amazing conversation. And I know I and everyone else that watched this can't wait to see what characters and what stories you guys create in the future. As a final reminder, Symbiosis and OKOYE to the People are both available through One More Page Books on our website, or you can come in store. And I will lead a round of applause where I will again be the only person clapping for our amazing authors. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone who in the comments.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, friends.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.